Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard. John, welcome back to the show. What's coming up today?
Jim, today we're going to talk about two different James Bay, the main James Bay and the James Bay Lowlands.
So what's new in the James Bay Lithium play?
Well, the James Bay Lithium Index this week lost a little bit of ground. It's down 7% from its starting point on August 1st, but total value traded has picked up a bit. There are now 62 members in the KRO James Bay Lithium Index after I found 4 more Australian listed companies that have projects in the James Bay region. There are total now 12 ASX listed companies and 50 Canadian listed companies. And all of them are hoping to make a world-class discovery such as Allchem's Galaxy Sear deposit and the more newer one, Patriot Battery Metals CV5 deposit on the Corvette project. Now, this week we had Harfang Exploration announce that its boots on the ground on the Serpent project, which has been primarily a gold play for the last few years when Francois Goulet was running it. They followed up on some pegmatite showings and were able to confirm that they have spodumene crystals in this pegmatite. So this is an LCT pegmatite, and this stock, which was sort of trading 14, 15 cents, kind of lackluster, it had a pretty good week trading up to 20, 21 cents. It's pulled back a bit right now, but the market's happy. There is an LCT pegmatite. They still have boots on the ground in that area to further outline how big it is, because it's not just good enough that you have an outcrop with LCT pegmatite with lots of spodumene in it. You also have to have size potential. There needs to be strike, and of course there needs to be down plunge extension which of course you won't know until it's drilling. Now I asked Ian Campbell, the CEO of Harfang, how is the moose hunt season affecting you? And the moose hunt season in the James Bay area starts today, September 15th, and runs until October 15th. And he says in the area where the Serpent project is, they do not have problems. And I've talked to other companies, and some have problems, others do not. And I've got a bit of further clarity on how this moose hunt happens. There seems to be 3 ways that the First Nations in the James Bay region hunt moose. One is the traditional way of driving along the main roads and waiting to see a moose on the road and just blasting it from the side of the road and cutting it up and hauling it into the back of the trickup, such as we see in that Cone Line movie about the Tahltan First Nations in North British Columbia. The second way is they use boats to travel the waterways. There's a lot of these long lakes in the James Bay region, and there's also rivers. So they follow the lakes and riverbank shores and look for moose standing on the edge. And then again, it's easy. If you bag a moose from a boat, you go right up to it and put it in the boat and motor back to your camp and ultimately your home. The third way, which I found out is interesting and is a main reason why there is this request during this period that helicopters not be active. It's not that the exploration companies cannot work in the region during the moose hunt season. It's that they don't want helicopters flying in key areas. And apparently a tradition during this 4-week period is to set up camp in their favorite location, someplace maybe where they go every year. Each group has its own special place to set up camp, and then wait for the moose to come to this area. And, during the year, they scout out and keep an eye out for where the moose hang out. And so they set up and they wait. So it's not like they're stalking through the swamp and that, trying to find a moose and then having to somehow drag it back, across, really bushy, nasty, watery terrain. This is not like winter where you get your snowmobile and you just drag it along the frozen snow. So they literally wait in these special areas with all their camping gear outfitted, and it becomes almost, I guess, kind of a party type of situation. And then I guess when they have as many moose as they want or need, then they call it quits and go home. Now, the problem with this approach is that if you're there waiting for the moose to gradually work their way from whatever the deeper into the bush area towards close to the road, because obviously you're going to have your favorite location near the road, some spur that goes off the main road, such as the Trans-Taiga or the Billy Diamond Highway, and you set up your camp. You're basically car camping. You're not hiking in with a pup tent or something like that, and doing it, roughing it in the wilderness. So when these helicopters come blasting along, this frightens away the moose, and it really frustrates their effort to catch a moose. So the companies that are active in this region, they've developed relationships with the various communities. They consult them. Where are you guys going to be doing your moose hunting? Where do we need to stay away from? And they definitely don't want helicopters following the roads, because of course they're using the roads as staging area for their own hunting activities. They don't want helicopters to follow these rivers and these lakes, because that's of course where they're hanging out also. And of course the ones where they're waiting for the moose with their camp, those are going to be close to roads. So if you're in an area that's your property overlaps these areas, you're going to be out of luck. You're going to have to sit out that month. If you're away from them, you just need to make sure that your helicopter plots a course that avoids the areas where the moose hunting is taking place. So this is why companies like Dios Exploration, when I asked Marie-Josée Girard, is this impacting your ability to put boots on the ground? And she says, no, our projects are in areas that are farther removed from where they do their traditional hunting. Plus, we talk to them. They tell us where we should not have our helicopters. So we're able to work with them and work around them so that we do not impact their moose hunting activity. Speaking of Dios Exploration, a curious thing is that the stock was looking good, and then all of a sudden it came, a lot of selling showed up, and we're wondering, okay, they finally got boots on the ground. What's happening? Why are somebody selling? Well, it turns out the company did a flow-through financing at 10 cents in December, and it's with a fund in Toronto, which in October has to distribute the fund to the holders. And the holders can request cash or shares. And there's a deadline by which they have to make this election. And once the fund owner knows this, then they know, okay, in the case of Dios, it turns out this year that 70% of the fund holders wanted, or 70% fund holders representing 70% of the fund, they wanted cash, and 5-6% interest versus a horrible bear market that the Prime Minister of Canada does absolutely nothing to try and turn around with his policy efforts. Say, oh yeah, I don't want stock in anything. I don't care whether it's in the James Bay region or anything. I want the cash. So this entity has been stuck selling 70% of this 4 million position they had. It's about 2.8 million shares, has to be liquidated. When this is done in October, this overhang will be gone. 1.2 million shares will be distributed to the fund holders that chose to get stock. That's not going to be a problem because it'll be a bunch of individuals who make up their own mind about whether they own it. And the other, the money that ends up in the pot gets distributed amongst the other 70% share by the other holders, and they go away, and that's it. So even though this company has got boots on the ground, continues to be staking projects based on serious data analysis, stock has sagged, and it's stuff like that which is keeping the James Bay Lithium Index from taking off. But that's just one particular local problem that will disappear. I think for those companies that continue to have boots on the ground and are able to work during the moose hunt period. There is going to be a great flow of information over the next month or so. There is, however, another curve that's being thrown at the poor James Bay Lithium play. There are now rumblings from the meteorologists that they are expecting an early cold and hard winter in the central Quebec region where James Bay is located. Normally, the ground stays clear until late November. Maybe there's a snowfall, but it quickly melts. But the hard frost that stays, where any snow that falls persists, that's usually late November. Now they're predicting that this is going to begin in October, and that is bad news for boots on the ground, because once white snow is blanketing the land, you can't see anything. So there is a panic out there amongst all these groups to get as much done as possible before the snow flies in the James Bay region earlier than normal. And one other thing about the whole lithium sector, this week was important because the European Union, not wanting another disaster like the solar panel industry, where it allowed Chinese solar technology to be imported to Europe to accelerate the installation of solar panels, which has killed the domestic European solar industry manufacturing sector. They're now seeing these pretty good Chinese cars, these EVs, wanting to come into the country. And the European car makers have been sort of asleep at the switch. Yes, they've been working on EVs, but they have not been ramping up anything to the degree that the Chinese have. The Chinese now have reached at least a temporary saturation, so they're producing more cars than their own people are buying, also partly because they are in an economic funk at the moment, and they want to ship to Europe, and their prices are cheaper. And now Europe wants to investigate whether or not the Chinese EV sector has been heavily subsidized by the state, and therefore that this is undermining the competitiveness of the European car makers, who have not had the benefit of state subsidies. And this has caused an uproar in China. And of course, much of the core materials that go into EVs come via China, if not necessarily mined there. They are refined and upgraded into battery materials. So Europe choosing to go this path, which it may not matter, because if China annexes Taiwan in the next year or so, everything's going to break down anyways. But the Europeans are now being forced to really think a world without China, and Canada's sitting there, and it has this incredible bounty of resources that could feed the EV sector, North America and Europe. I think the European audience out there has to start looking at Canada and supporting the exploration efforts of all these juniors to deliver this lithium supply that's going to need to increase 6, maybe 12 times over the next 10 to 12 years.
What's the best way to play Rio Tinto's exposure to the James Bay Great Canadian Area play?
Rio Tinto is one of the few major mining companies to take lithium seriously, and they started taking it seriously 15 years ago or so when they discovered the Jadar deposit in Serbia. Jadar is a unique sediment-hosted type of deposit whose grade is up there, equivalent to about 2%, 1.5 to 2% lithium oxide. They figured out the metallurgy. They were set to develop it, and then the project got confiscated by the Serbian government when various NGOs protested that they didn't want this nice alpine cattle ranching, cattle grazing, dairy cow grazing a region to be turned into a giant mining region. But Rio Tinto has gone on to declare that based on its analysis of future EV lithium requirements, the world will need 60 Jadar equivalent deposits by 2035. And in terms of size, last week I talked about how Patriot Battery Metals CV5 deposit and Liontown's Kathleen Valley deposit are basically the equivalent of a Jadar each. And we need 60 of those. And last week I also talked about how if Toyota's solid-state battery is real, and by 2030, it's starting to roll out Corolla and Camry EVs with solid-state batteries that use lithium metal in the anode. We're going to need not just 60 JDAR, but any JDARs, but 120 to 150 JDARs. And Rio Tinto obviously knows its lithium gain, but has been reluctant to step in and take out something like Patriot Battery Metals, which right now is valued at $1.5 billion, and has at least 3 more years of feasibility demonstrating and permitting before it can be in production. But a couple of months ago, it took steps to auction into 2 juniors James Bay property packages. One was Midland Exploration, the other was Azimut Exploration. Both of them had similar deals, except the Azimut deal, which came later, it had the benefit of hindsight, so it was able to make the deal better so that it can drop to a 25% carried interest, whereas Midland's kind of stuck with a 30% participating interest if and when Rio Tinto vests in any of the 7 or 8 projects that they optioned to Rio Tinto. And I was kind of negative towards both companies because I thought they should have kept those companies 100% and harvested the low-hanging fruit that's available for the first pass of boots on the ground. However, since then, I've sort of thought, okay, well, it is what it is. Rio Tinto is going to look hard. In the case of Midland, it's operating the project. It's out there on the Galenay, which is in the Winsome area. That same trend follows onto their property. Azimut has a 50-50 JV with Soquem on its Galenay project, which is just south of Winsome's Andina project. Azimut put out some news about finding some spodumene boulders on its property, but there's no outcrop on its property where the Andina pegmatite probably dips onto Azimut's property. They haven't found any outcrop. The geology they have got mapped to the south doesn't look very promising, but Midland's Galenay project looks promising. And I would say if Rio Tinto is going to find something there, because it's kind of a continuation of the trend on Winsome's Andina project, this could be an area where Rio Tinto gets a big foothold and develops it. So if that project goes to discovery stage, then we will get, Midland will have a 30% net interest, and it'll be covered for about $100 million or something large like that. And it's not going to take 8-9 years for Rio Tinto to spend that. It's going to spend it very quickly once it finds a good pegmatite. Azimut only optioned 2 properties south of the Corvette trend to Rio Tinto, and it's operating the program. It gets to decide what to do. I'm not impressed by either of these particular blocks. They've published a lake bottom sediment chemistry for lithium, and it shows that there's parts of the property that's there, but we don't know exactly where this lithium came from. Glaciers could have dragged stuff into these lakes. It's a little bit more complex than just finding where the map lights up with 99 percentile numbers. So I really wouldn't own Azimut as a play on Rio Tinto's success. Azimut itself, after being very reluctant about the lithium potential of James Bay, it seemed to be much more interested in the nickel potential. It has gone out and staked a large property and a cluster of other ones around it called the JBL, which it is now owning 100%, and it looks like it's going to take a hard look at that. So Azimut's best looked at in terms of its 100% projects, and of course it still has the Elmer gold property 100%. And when you do the sort of implied value calculations, their 100% projects currently have a value of about $98 million on a 100% basis. Their 30% net interest in the Rio Tinto ground is about $300 million. And in the 50-50 claims that they have with Soquem, Piqua, and Galenay, there it's now carrying about $180 $82 million valuation. And what does that mean? Well, it's stock price times fully diluted divided by net interest. And the way you look at these companies is if they suddenly come within reach of something that's worth maybe $1 or $2 billion, if they have 30% of that, ultimately 30% of a $1 billion prize is $300 million. But in the case of, say, the farm outs to Rio Tinto, Azimut's already carrying a $300 million value. So you don't get a lot of bang from that deal. You're much better off with something like Dios Exploration, which owns its projects 100%, and based on its fully diluted, it has a $14 million valuation right now. So there's a lot of upside with these smaller independent companies that don't have anything farmed out and that still have a relatively cheap price. Between Midland and Azimut, Midland has a $48 million valuation for its 100% owned project. Now, it's a prospect generator farm out, Junior, but it's got 7 or 8 properties farmed out to Rio Tinto, and 2 of them, Gallané and Como, I think are very good just based on what they already know about it. So either one of these could become a major story. And again, keep in mind, we need 60 to 120 JDARs by 2035, which means if Rio Tinto finds something big at Gallané, it's going to develop it. If it finds something big at Como, it's going to develop it. It's not like the rare earth game where you find a bunch and you keep the best one and you just leave the other one alone. No, all of these that reach world-class potential will end up getting developed. And I went through Midland's sort of website, and I realized they actually have a bunch of other properties still owned 100% that weren't auctioned to Rio Tinto. And Gino Roger tells me that they're now taking a close look at those to see if there's some low-hanging fruit that they themselves can harvest. Whether they'll have time to do it this summer, I don't know, given all these restrictions. But it has all that going for it also. Plus, they have all these properties in the Abitibi belt, that some of them which are farmed out to majors, any one of which could turn into a big gold discovery. And then they have projects in the Nunavik area of northern Quebec farmed out to Rio Tinto for base metals. That could also end up being a success. And the company has $5 million working capital, so it doesn't need to finance. And at $48 million for its 100% owned project, there's a lot of upside if Midland starts getting lucky. Much better upside than Azimut when you just compare them on their 100% basis and 100% owned project basis. But with regard to the question, if you're trying to make a play on Rio Tinto's success potential in James Bay, Midland Exploration wins hands down right now, in my opinion.
Will the James Bay Lowlands become a major diamond play?
Now, the James Bay Lowlands is that area south and southwest of the James Bay, which is that sort of foot of Hudson's Bay. And this area on the Ontario side doesn't have any pegmatite potential, but it does have carbonatite potential. In fact, the Niobe's James Bay deposit found in the 60s, for which it did a PEA that says this should be developed. That's stalled right now because the First Nations in this region are a no-can-do type of nation. They do not want anything developed in their backyard. They're in the grip of outside NGOs who whisper to them, no, don't desecrate your mosquito bog-filled backyard. You don't want anything in your backyard. Now, much farther south than the Niobe's James Bay deposit, which is stalled, there is VR Resources with a very exciting new story, which we've talked about here on Kaiser Watch a number of times. They have the Hecla Kilmer project which is a carbonatite. It has rare earth potential. Right now, they are getting some mineralogical work done on the better grading mineralization to see where the heavies and the light magnet rare earths hide and what sort of flow sheet will likely be required, because if it's a horrible mineral package, you don't want to waste too much time. But if it is a mineral package that does have understood cracking procedures, then you might want to go and develop it further. But the big surprise last year, which they revealed this year, was the Northway carbonatite, a 1.2 kilometer wide magnetic low that everybody had known about for decades but never drilled because it didn't really fit anything that seemed worth, of economic value. It was too large, they believed, to be a kimberlite. So back in the 70s and 80s, when Selco drilled these targets, it ignored this target. Well, when VR drilled it, they discovered that quite deep, under 200 meters of sediments that had filled in some a crater in the basement country rock, to the sides of which is a limestone platform. They intersected what looked awfully lot like kimberlite, but it was only a 30-meter interval on highly altered sort of crater facies material. They have since drilled two more deeper, fresh holes. They've got 370 meters of kimberlite still pending, but they reported the results this week. For the first 30 meters, they recovered one diamond fragment. It's absolutely tiny. It's like probably caught by a 0.1 millimeter sieve. So it's kind of meaningless, but the market greeted it very positively. There's no way this can indicate any commercial grade potential, but what was really encouraging is that they finally got some classification of the minerals which indicate that this is indeed a magma that came deep and could have sampled the diamond stability field during its ascent. It's not your classic peridotitic type of diamond population you're going to find in this. There are no pyrope garnets in this. This is not like the Lac de Gras pipes where you see those purple pyrope G10, G9 garnets. But they are seeing eclogitic garnets, and they are seeing this material called Websterite. And that's really interesting because the Victor pipe in the Ottawa-Piscat region, about 300 kilometers to the northwest, these were all found by drilling geophysical targets, and it looked like a bust because when De Beers did the chemistry, it didn't match any of the chemistry it was familiar with. The microdiamonds came in pretty abysmal. There wasn't much there, but then somebody had the idea, let's try a larger sample, and in the larger sample, the macrodiamonds started to show up, and eventually the grade proved to be 25 CPHT. It turned into a mine, mainly because the diamonds were very high quality. And Websterite turns out to be a key part of that system, and Websterite is present in the Northway pipe. So now the question is, will this pipe have any macro grade potential? We won't know until the other two holes are processed. SRC is working on that. It could be a month. It could be several weeks. Who knows? In any case, the company is not going to resume any further work this year. In fact, it's not going to resume work on this particular body because it's got 20 other similar mag lows, but these are only 100 to 500 meters in diameter. And the 500 meter diameter type pipe, that's potentially a 500 million ton pipe. So that's potentially huge too. But these smaller targets, if these prove to be also kimberlite eruptions, all during this Devonian period, similar age as Northway, before the limestones were laid down and paved over everything, this would be a field of blind kimberlites that nobody had any chance of finding through traditional indicator mineral sampling in the tills, because they're all underneath younger limestones. There's no outcrop, no exposure. So the next step for VR Resources will be to go in there in first quarter of 2024 and start drilling holes into these other targets. and they may all be nothing, and that's still the big milestone that needs to be achieved. Are these mag lows, which Mike Gunning attributes to the fact that the Earth's polarity was reversed at the time of eruption, so that they stand out in reverse to the polarity that was in place when the Precambrian and Archean rocks beneath formed. If this is the case, and they are all diagnostic of these kimberlite emplacements, they'll have a whole field. The smaller one will have excavated less of the country rock, so the kimberlite itself won't be as deep. The challenge with Northway 1 is that they have to go through a couple hundred meters of garbage to get down into the kimberlite itself. And if it's the kind like the De Beers Victor, where the microdiamonds are absent, they're not telling you, you're going to have to take large samples. That's going to be expensive. Out of this next batch, they're going to need to see something really good to indicate that there's macro-grade potential to be able to raise the money. But if they go this next step and show that this big one is simply part of a much larger field, and that any one of these other ones could be the one that's a world-class diamond pipe, that's the way to go. So it's not yet a major diamond play, but this week we went one step closer to achieving the dream that here is a brand new kimberlite field that could end up having commercial diamond grades. It's not going to be your classic center of the craton, deepest part of the keel type of pipe. This is a sort of craton margin type pipe, but then big ones like Orapa and Venetia, these all formed on the margins of cratons, and the eclogite comes from oceanic basalt that got subducted and somehow shoved deep enough into the mantle so that it could become part of the diamond growing field, so that when a kimberlite magma gets the field that it needs to rise, starts to come up, it can entrain these diamond fields within the stability field, pick it up and mix it in with the magma and then explode at that surface. These margin type craton margin type kimberlites do not have the same chemistry as the ones that are dead center and whose Hartsbergite and Lherzolite comes from a shallower level of the craton. So it's part of that oddball ball suite of the kimberlites, but it's still an exciting play because it's a complete virgin play with chemistry that isn't obviously diagnostic. But if those other mag lows are kimberlites, this is going to be a very exciting play next year.
John, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
I'm Jim Goddard. Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.